because so often in dance, the demands are so high, but there's not the support to sort of meet those demands. And we push ourselves and we make it happen kind of by a miracle, but we don't have that same support that, say, athletes have with like a whole staff of wellness people to keep them at their best level. So probably like you with the Brainy Ballerina, I'm guessing like I wanted to be part of the support. I knew I had overcome things like difficult body image and going through restrictive eating and fad dieting and self-doubt and comparison. And I knew that I wanted to combine all of that with this new knowledge and certification from IIN. And so I just knew it was time to share it through the Nourished Dancer.
I'm Caitlin, a former professional ballerina turned dance educator and career mentor, and this is the Brainy Ballerina podcast. I am here for the aspiring professional ballerina who wants to learn what it really takes to build a smart and sustainable career in the dance industry. I'm peeling back the curtain of the professional dance world with open and honest conversations about the realities of becoming a professional dancer. Come along to gain the knowledge and inspiration you need to succeed in a dance career on your terms. Hello and welcome to the Brainy Ballerina podcast. I'm your host, Caitlin Sloan, and I am joined today by Nicole Sabella. Nicole is a multi-passionate dance professional and founder of the Nourished Dancer. She toured the world as a core member of the Mark Morris dance group for a decade and is now a dedicated dance educator, certified integrative nutrition health coach, and certified EFT tapping practitioner. Nicole, I am so thrilled to speak to you today, and I would love to hear, why did you take your very first dance class?
Amazing. Well, I'm happy to share, but I just want to say thank you, Caitlin, for having me, and I'm really excited.
Of course.
Well, according to my mom, I was always dancing. She liked to tell the story of going to an Elton John concert when she was pregnant. And I was just like bouncing all over the place in her belly. And so she told me I was always dancing. I think at age 4, I just told her, I said, Mom, I'm going to be a dancer when I grow up. And she was like, okay. She always said, if you ever get tired of it, we can stop. But she enrolled me and I just never stopped, and I still haven't.
And what was your training like growing up?
Well, I started, like most dancers, at a local studio, studying tap and jazz, a little ballet, did some competitions, but then that studio closed, maybe when I was in middle school. But I went to a middle school and high school magnet program for the performing arts. So I was getting dance training in public school, which was great. In that training, it was mostly Vaganova ballet and Horton modern technique. So it was very codified. Like both of those techniques are like, there is right and wrong, there is yes and no. So I was very strong, but had like a very codified training. But I was also going to a ballet studio called the Academy of Ballet Arts. And it was very ballet. We did YAGP when it was fairly new, early 2000s. But my director brought in a lot of guest choreographers and there were summer programs. So I did get other dance training in jazz and in different styles of modern, and it felt very diversified, even though my regular training was very codified. So a nice balance. And then I went to college. I got my BFA from the University of the Arts in modern dance. And the minute I learned modern dance, even back in high school, it just felt so rich to me. It was something I always knew that I wanted to follow.
What was your experience like in college? What made you decide to take that path from high school?
Well, the high school is called Pinellas County Center for the Arts. It's still in St. Petersburg, Florida, and it is a college preparatory program. So part of our training was preparing to audition for college and getting all of those materials ready. That was all done in school. So I think it was sort of just a path that was accessible and laid out to me. And because I was in public schooling where dance felt like an academic to me, it felt equally important to like math. I mean, to me, it was way more important, but it was given that importance. So it didn't feel that far off for me to go to college where dance would still be part of my education.
Mm-hmm. As you transitioned out of college and into your career, what was that transition like for you?
Difficult. Very, very difficult. My mom was a single mom And so by the point I graduated college, and even during college, I was 100% financially independent out of necessity. I was working, waiting tables late nights while in college to support myself. But then after college came the student loan debt, like so many people had. So then it was even more a necessity that I had to make money. And there was no safety net of like, if you can't make rent, I've got you. Like there wasn't that
Mm-hmm.
safety net. So it was really difficult for me to balance the long hours at a restaurant, up on your legs, getting home late, making sure I was getting to class, making sure I was getting to rehearsals and trying to like make it, right? Like that was really, really hard. But I will say, to answer your question, that in college I had already begun performing with a local company. One of my professors, Zane Booker, had a company at the time called SLJ Arts Initiative. And I'll never forget the first time I was paid to dance. I'm sure you can relate. Like, it's like this magical feeling. Like, wow, I got paid to do like what I love so much. So after college, I stayed in Philly for about 2 years and I danced freelance with several local groups. There was a moment where I just started feeling this call. If I was going to do this dance thing, like, now is the time. I was in my early 20s and I started feeling the call to go to New York City. I remember coming home after a rehearsal and I just said to my boyfriend at the time, who's now my husband, I said, I have to move to New York. This is something I have to do. And I totally understand if you don't want to come with me, but I'm going. It was like this instantaneous knowing that I had to do this. And he said, okay, let's go. He showed me he was the winner in that moment.
Yeah.
But I wasn't testing him, but he passed the test. And between that time that we did move to New York and that I had that realization, there was an open call for the Mark Morris Dance Group in Brooklyn. So I took the mega bus from Philly to Manhattan and then MTA to Brooklyn. There was about 400 women in that call, and I made the callback. And then there was a 4-day long callback, which in my mind, I was like,
Wow.
this is really cool. Like, it's like an intensive, basically. I'm learning all this rep and I'm getting to know Mark Morris's style. It's not like you have to regurgitate it in 5 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Most auditions, there was those 4 days to really like refine it. And then on the last day, we showed everything to Mark Morris. And I made it to the end, but I did not get a contract. And Mark and Nancy, the executive director, told me to stay in touch. And so I did. I told them I was moving to New York soon and I would be in touch. So Andrew and I did move to Brooklyn. And then literally nothing happened. There were like crickets for what felt like forever, but it was probably like a year and a half. Not a friend in ballet class who invited me to a rehearsal, no connection building. It took me so long to get into a groove of a new city because I was lining up regular person jobs to pay the rent, and I was barely getting to class or making time to audition because I was having to wait tables. And eventually I did find a routine and I started working under Maria Hanley, who's an early childhood dance educator, and she trained me in teaching early childhood dance. So I was able to give up the restaurants, and that freed me up to be able to focus on what I needed to do to be a dancer. After about 2 years of living in New York, I was showing my face. I was taking class at the Mark Morris Dance Center, and I got a call to understudy Mark Morris's L'Allegro at Lincoln Center. That would have been in 2013. And that was like a total pinch me. It was amazing. And on the day of the show, classic, I needed to go in for someone on the day of the show. So the following summer, I was invited again to understudy that same work, but this time it was for the PBS filming and it was taking place in Madrid, Spain. So it was like no pressure. We're just like filming this for posterity. And I did end up having to go in to part of that also. And when we came back to New York, then they invited me on with a contract as an apprentice. At that moment, it definitely was a dream come true because it was a full time dancing contract with benefits and with a choreographer that I really admired.
Having toured the world with Mark Morris for a decade, what do you think led you to have such longevity in your dance career?
I'll start off by saying it's not uncommon in MMDG for dancers to stay 10, 15 years. It's like not a revolving door type of company. But you're right. In dancer years, 10 years is like a lifetime.
Yeah.
So that is a long time. I'll accredit some of that to having a PT on staff at Mark Morris, and also Mark valuing nuance and simple, clear technique over things like tricks and flashy steps. That's just his aesthetic, let's say. But in that decade, I did have two very major injuries that at the time seemed like they could have been career ending. By the second one, the company was thinking it was probably career ending. I had some overuse in my right ankle, and we later found out it was from a deformity from birth. I have two bones in my foot that are connected that shouldn't be connected, the calcaneus and the talus. And so that was causing all kinds of things not being able to track appropriately. And then, right as I was getting over that, I had a knee injury, a popliteal cyst in the right knee. And the thinking was that it was due to the ankle not functioning properly. So it was like one blow after the next. It was very mentally challenging because it was something that I couldn't fix, right? The bones are connected, period. And so it was like, how can I work around this? And that took a lot of mental work, actually, and emotional work to overcome that sort of barrier. I'd say the longevity came from, yes, what most dancers do, which is I was diligently going to PT. I was working with my Pilates instructor, Clarice Marshall, on some muscular repatterning to hopefully help the ankle. So I was doing all the things that are normal in healing an injury, but I was also taking a very holistic approach that was geared toward lowering inflammation and also balancing my nervous system, coming into the parasympathetic, because that's where healing can take place. And it's so easy when we're injured to be in that fight or flight part of the nervous system because it's so stressful. So I knew that I needed to be focused on coming into as much groundedness as I could. So I was making sure to eat anti-inflammatory foods to really nourish my body in a way that would promote lower inflammation. I was doing all the things. I was going to acupuncture, I was taking supplements. At a certain point, I was seeing a chiropractor to get my bones in better alignment. The biggest one was my mental and emotional health. I was seeing a traditional therapist pretty much the whole time I was in the company. But during that period of being injured, I also invested in working with an EFT practitioner. And I've since become certified in emotional freedom techniques. But our emotions are very intricately linked to our nervous system. So, of course, when we're injured, we're feeling things like anger and FOMO and feeling like it's our fault or I'll never get back. So, I knew that I needed to effectively process those feelings and move them through my body because emotions can raise cortisol and all of those inflammatory things. So, this was going with my anti inflammatory holistic method. And I'd say that that was very transformational for me. It was very important in getting over the hump of feeling like I won't be able to get through this so that I could actually focus on what I needed to do to heal my body. And so I know that can sound overwhelming to a lot of dancers if they're injured. Like, I did all the things. And I recognize there's some privilege in that too. But as long as you are doing what feels right for you in making sure physically, mentally, and emotionally you're taking care of yourself, I know all of those three things are what contributed to my longevity.
I know as a dancer, especially, younger and training and everything, that I definitely neglected that mental and emotional part during injuries because in my mind it was all physical. And I did find, similar to you, like, and I wouldn't even say that I did all of those techniques, and I'd love to hear more about those, but just even the simple act of accepting that it was an emotional time and that it was hard and that I was allowed to be upset and mad, and then that was okay. And then also recognizing like when going into the studio felt bad and when it felt good. Because I think one thing that a lot of dancers struggle with, at least that I did, was this thought that like I'm injured, but I still need to be there all the time. I'm supposed to be present, still learning the rep or being there for my colleagues. And yes, there are certain injuries where you still have to be there because maybe you're out for a week and it's like, well, yeah, you still need to make sure you're learning the rep, getting the corrections, ready to go back in when you're ready again. But if it's like a longer term thing, I found that being in the studio was really harmful for me because I would just get way more depressed, be way more down on myself. I used all my energy there. I didn't have the energy to be doing my PT or whatever else I needed to be doing outside of it. So that's one thing I always say to dancers is have a conversation with your director and talk about, do I need to be here? Is it okay if I'm not present in the studio if it's affecting you emotionally? Because you get in this place where you're always told like you should be there, and then it can affect you and that can affect your healing physically.
100%. You are speaking my language. I actually had to have that conversation because for the first injury, unless the company was on tour, I was there and it was affecting my mental health. And so by the time I got to the second injury, I forget exactly how it went down, but I did say, I really think I could be more effective if I'm able to go to the acupuncture appointment and if I'm able to take care of myself in X, Y, and Z ways. And we did work out a system, but I completely agree with you that chatting with your director or your rehearsal director or your teacher, if you're injured, and finding a plan that works for both parties is very practical because it's also freeing up your time so that you can take care of yourself and get back sooner. So it's a win-win on both sides. So I totally encourage dancers to do that.
Yeah, exactly. Let's pause this episode so I can tell you about one of my favorite resources for dancers, Ballet Help Desk. If you've been loving the Brainy Ballerina podcast, you'll want to add the Ballet Help Desk pod to your list. This is the premier podcast for dance parents, and hosts Brett and Jenny share weekly expert insights on supporting your students' ballet education. They cover key topics like summer intensives, ballet competitions, full-time and post-grad training, health and wellness, boys in ballet, and more to help your dancer make the most informed decisions about their unique training path. Another one of my favorite resources from Ballet Help Desk is their reviews. Head to their website for over 1,400 reviews on summer intensives and year-round training programs. And while you're at it, submit your review to help other dancers and their families make important decisions about their future. The more transparency in the dance world, the better. Head to the show notes to visit the Ballet Help Desk website today. Can you tell us more about EFT and these techniques that you used as a dancer and that now you're certified in?
Sure. So EFT tapping stands for Emotional Freedom Techniques, and it's an evidence based practice. It uses the same meridian system as acupuncture, so the meridian system from Chinese medicine. And what we do is we tap on different meridian endpoints on the body, mostly around the face and upper body, while talking about the memory or the situation or the feeling that is distressing. And of course, there's a more codified technique to that, but generally speaking. And what that does is that tapping action speaks to the part of the brain called the amygdala. And that's the part of the brain that controls that fight or flight response. So it brings a soothing to the nervous system and to the body, and it helps the person or the client relate to the emotion. There's less emotional charge. So you can relate to it like thinking about what you ate for breakfast in the morning. It's not like Men in Black where you're wiping your your memory, right? You still remember, you know that happened, but you're relating to it in a much different way. You can hold it a little bit more loosely, and that frees up your energy. It lowers cortisol, boosts dopamine, balances the nervous system while effectively processing emotions. Something that really fascinates me is that emotions are measurable. They're chemical responses in the body that science can see and know. So, how can we effectively process them and not push them down so they grow really big? Because if we ignore them, they get bigger, right? So, looking at them with compassion through this process is very, very effective.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's something as dancers we tend to want to do is really push those emotions down. We're always taught leave it at the door, whatever's going on, just leave it at the door, come in the studio and do your work and be focused. And it's not how it actually works in
Exactly.
real life. You can't just compartmentalize those things, or maybe you can for a short period of time, but it's going to catch up to you eventually and it's going to affect everything. And I always say too, I always found like some injuries were different, but a lot of injuries that I had where they were maybe like a sprained ankle or something that was just kind of like I wasn't paying attention as much as I could have been, or like I was having a really hard emotional day. And instead of being like, I need to do something about this, I need to accept this, I need to work through this, I would just try to leave it at the door, but it's not gone, it's still there. And then my brain would be distracted. I would take a weird step, sprain my ankle, and it always happened in those times when I was in a bad place to begin with. And then when I was able to take those emotions and find a way to use them in my dancing, it was so much more effective. I realized I could use that in a more effective way and actually make me a better dancer and bring that into the studio instead of just saying, you're not allowed to feel emotions, so just pretend that didn't happen.
I love that because you're absolutely right. What we're going through in our lives is inextricable from how we're dancing. They are very much the same thing. And the more you grow emotionally and mature in that way, and are able to hold a variety of emotions, then we're able to express ourselves more artistically and access those when we're being called to do so in choreography. So it's all part of the journey as an artist of taking whatever you're going through or a difficult lesson or a challenge, learning those lessons, and then sort of transmuting them or alchemizing them into your artistic process or into practical ways to learn for the future.
Mm-hmm. Having been in a company that did a lot of touring, do you have any tips for dancers going on tour, living that lifestyle?
Definitely. Well, for dancers who are introverts like me, I would say try to find the balance between being with the group and doing the whole social aspect of touring, which is very important. Don't ignore that either, but also do what you need to do for yourself. That's what I would say. Leave the party early, take the bath, and have no FOMO about that. Like, do what you need to do for yourself and find that balance. I would also say to not worry about eating perfectly because on tour, you're away from your normal eating habits, and that can be really disorienting for a lot of dancers. But try to make the best choice you can make in each situation and give yourself credit for that. Like you might not have an A plus choice, but the best you could do is the C plus choice and give yourself props for that. And pack your favorite snacks and do what you can, but also hold it loosely without obsessing.
I always think of this tour we went on. We didn't do a lot of touring at MCB, but we did go on tour to South Korea. We had a sister city and we were invited to come perform as part of this big expo. So they were hosting us. They were so, so kind and great hosts. And we were staying in this hotel, and every single morning at the breakfast at the hotel, there was French fries. And we were like, that's interesting. And I think by day 3, somebody asked one of our guides, do you always have French fries for breakfast? Is that part of a normal Korean breakfast? And they said, no, in America you do. And we were like, no,
Wow.
we really don't. Like, that's not normal. But they were trying to make us feel comfortable, and we're trying to make sure we had the things that we were used to. And they were just like, oh, Americans eat French fries for every meal, so we'll make sure they have
Wow.
this. And it was so funny. And it was just like such a interesting cultural thing. But I do think that's so true. I mean, that was a tour I went on that was the most different than my normal eating patterns and trying new things and being a little bit more adventurous. But
Mm-hmm.
it definitely was. I was glad that I brought like just bars and that kind of thing. If I ever had something that didn't sit well with my stomach, I'm one of those people who's like, I feel like I get nauseous from anything, like just
Mm-hmm.
very easily nauseous. So I would just be like, you know what? I have to perform. I'm just going to have one of my bars or something so that I feel like my tummy doesn't get upset. And then I would try everything after the performances because I was still wanting to experience the culture. But I totally agree with that. Like, you just never know what will be available.
Definitely. That is a great story because they were trying so hard to take care of you. And
I know.
but yes, some funky food things happen on tour, absolutely. So rolling with the punches, but also
Yeah.
coming prepared is a big
Yeah.
part of it. Yeah.
I cut you off when you were going to say, was there something else that you wanted to? share
Oh,
about
yes.
tour life?
Warm up.
Mm.
Make sure to warm up because it's really easy to get excited by the new city or the new country and do all the sightseeing and all the social things. But in those long theater days, they take a toll on the body, and leaving ample time to warm up and cool down is very, very important. We know that, but just a friendly reminder.
Yes, no, for sure. It can get hard, especially when you're out of your normal routine and you're traveling and you're like sleeping in a bed that's not yours. There's so many things out of your control, and that is definitely do the things you can control to make yourself still be able to feel your best.
Absolutely.
Do you have a favorite piece or a favorite memory or role from your time dancing with Mark Morris?
I would say the most artistically enriching experience I had in the company was a piece Mark was creating when I was fairly new called Layla and Majnun. In the Middle East, that's basically like their story of Romeo and Juliet. It's a very famous story in that culture. And we worked with the Silk Road Ensemble. At the time, it was Yo-Yo Ma's group, and used this beautiful opera. And so it felt artistically enriching because I was learning about this other culture and I was one of the Laylas, taking on this role, this beautiful music, and the singers are right there on stage next to us, sort of feeling the vibration of their voice as you're dancing and bringing that to life. I was always told from a young age, like, you're such a performer. And yes, I loved performing, but I learned while I was in the company that being in creative process was very interesting for me. The try that again. No, face a different direction. Let's do it in a canon. Wait, we're going to do it in this formation. Like all of that is like super fascinating to my brain. And so I loved being in this process that was also cultural and artistic and historical.
So you recently retired. Can you talk about how you decided it was time to close the performing chapter?
Yes, this is a big one because it was very recent for me. From the time I joined the Mark Morris Dance Group, I always had in my head that I wanted to dance about 10 years with the company, which I did. So I was coming up on that time and I was like gracefully and slowly planning how I would leave, but I hadn't made any big announcements. It was still just like an idea in my head. It hadn't been real yet. But then in March of 2023, I got very, very sick. I started feeling it while I was on tour in Arizona and Seattle. I started having night sweats and what felt like a stomach bug. When I got back to New York, I saw my doctor and we were taking precautions as though it was maybe like a norovirus, but I had had it for a length of time, so he didn't think I was contagious anymore. So I got clearance to do our next show, which was the following week at the Brooklyn Academy of Music, which feels like Mark Morris Dance Group's sort of like home base. There's a nice affiliation there, but it's not technically that, but feels that way. So I did the shows. We thought it would pass. We thought it was just something like that. But shortly after, I got very, very ill. My blood work was very scary. I was tested for everything under the sun for a month straight. And in the meantime, I was just getting sicker and sicker, but we couldn't figure out what it was. And then I had a CT scan finally, and they discovered a mass in my abdomen. And eventually we learned it was a very rare type of cancerous tumor in the retroperitoneum, which is a space in the abdomen. That was new to me as well. And that this tumor needed to be taken out immediately. So that was very scary. In the meantime, I was like missing a world premiere that I had rehearsed. There was all those dancer things going on in the background. But within 2 days of learning that, I was brought in for a major abdominal surgery, removing the tumor, a kidney, an adrenal gland, a lot. It was major. And then an 8-day hospital stay. I can say now, 8 months out, that thankfully I'm healing very well. I'd say it was about a 4-month recovery from not being able to get out of bed, not even be able to laugh or like cry because the way that palpates the stomach, it's too painful, to full workouts in the gym. And I did that. I was seeing a PT and I was, following all of the rules about when I could start being active, but I was diligent in making sure I was getting back. And now I'm working back in ballet classes just for me. But all of that to say is it was another time where I just had like this small voice in my head and a knowing. Like the moment I found out what it was, I knew it was time. And it wasn't even that I thought I wouldn't be able to recover. Of course, there were those doubts because of how scary it was, but I'm so familiar with recovery from those injuries. Not at all that it's the same thing, but I believed so much in the body's ability to recover. Like I know that the body can recover and it's resilient, but it was more so just a knowing that I knew it was time to put my health first and lower my stress, because as much as we all love dancing, the show must go on and it can be a very stressful thing, even though we love it so much. So yeah, my last show was March 2023. I'm sorry, 2024. Oh my goodness, March 2024 in Brooklyn. That was sort of the whole view of why I left.
Wow. And how are you doing now with all of that?
I'm still going in for scans every 4 months, and so far I've been doing really well and they've been clear. And we're taking it a day at a time. I'm paying extra attention to my nutrition and the way I take care of myself and also my mental and emotional health. And so far I'm doing really well.
And how are you feeling mentally, emotionally about retiring?
It's almost like this situation took some of the pressure off. I know a lot of retired dancers. I have friends who still can't go see a show or still can't step foot in a theater or even a dance class. I'm grateful to say I'm not experiencing that because there was such clarity that now is the time. Like you completed what you were supposed to do there. You've learned all you can. It was a great experience, but it's time. So there are times I miss being that active or that feeling of being so embodied, but I am feeling pretty excited actually about my future and what I'm building and myself as a teacher, and even rediscovering what dance means for me at this stage because I still love moving my body to music. So it's a process, but I'm
Yeah,
feeling pretty good.
good. Let's quickly pause this episode so I can share with you one of my favorite snacks that I have been loving lately. As a busy dancer, educator, and mom, I am always looking for a snack that I can throw into my dance bag that will be quick, convenient, and provide lasting energy. That's why I was so excited to find Aloha protein bars. Aloha bars give me everything I need with 14 grams of plant based protein and 10 grams of fiber. I can count on this snack to keep me going. Plus, they are delicious. My favorite flavors are the coconut chocolate almond and the lemon cashew. But honestly, you cannot go wrong. These products are vegan, gluten free, and certified organic. And the best news is you can get 20% off your first order with code BrainyBallerina. Head to the show notes and click the link to try Aloha protein bars for yourself today. Can you tell us more about the Nourished Dancer, how that started, what you do?
Sure. So, yes, on a much lighter note, while dancing full time, it was 2017. I enrolled in a year long program with the Institute of Integrative Nutrition, and I earned my holistic health coach certification then. And while I was in the company, I was coaching people from all walks of life. But then the pandemic happened in 2020, and I sort of got really serious. And I realized how much I loved coaching, but that I was really wanting to work specifically with dancers and reconnect to that, because so often in dance the demands are so high but there's not the support to sort of meet those demands, and we push ourselves and we make it happen kind of by a miracle, but we don't have that same support that say athletes have with like a whole staff of wellness people to keep them at their best level. So probably like you with the brainy ballerina, I'm guessing like I wanted to be part of the support. I knew I had overcome things like difficult body image and going through restrictive eating and fad dieting and self-doubt and comparison, and I knew that I wanted to combine all of that with this new knowledge and certification from IIN. And so I just knew it was time to share it through the Nourished Dancer.
So, can you share some of those practical tools that you teach dancers to help them with their dance careers?
Yes. So grounding and emotional regulation is a big one because we kind of can't make lasting change without that. So through things like meditation and the EFT tapping, nutrition knowledge and education from an eating for energy perspective, growth mindset skills, Carol Dweck, confidence exercises, building confidence, body image practices, a lot of that built on the work of Lindsay and Lexi Kite from More Than a Body. They have a great book and TED Talk, and I've made it apply to dance in my own work. And then really pointed journal prompts that are specific to each dancer. And the sweet spot I find is integrating all of that into the body through private lessons. So discovering how all of that inner work is affecting the dancer outwardly in their dancing, and getting the privilege of watching the transformation of dancers who start out timid and more reserved and maybe eyes are at the floor, that kind of thing, to really bold and confident and risk taking dancers. And a lot of their instructors or teachers will even mirror that back to them or give them that feedback. Because what I found is, especially today, there's so much talent. Like, talent is rarely the issue. It's like actually these softer skills that can set the dancer apart. For instance, like, do you get into the audition and shrink because of low confidence? Or does your anxiety get the best out of you and you fall out of your turns? Or at minute 25 of the 30-minute long dance, are you exhausted because you're underfueled? Those are the actual things that make a difference. And of course, it's individualized for the dancer in front of me. But those are my go-to tools.
So if a dancer needs support and they come to you, what does that process look like?
The first thing is a Nourished Dancer call, which is a totally free coaching call where the dancer and myself, we're learning about each other. So I'm learning about their challenges, their goals. And if I think I have a program that supports them in reaching those goals, I communicate what that program would be. I offer the Dancer's Wellness Program and also a Master Your Mindset program, and then additionally private lessons. So we talk about what might be most beneficial for them in those goals. Then there's a period where they can decide if that's what's best for them, and then we'll move forward with one of those programs.
Amazing. I know you touched on injury and those kind of things as a dancer and how you use some of these techniques to help heal and have a more holistic approach. Was there anything else that you personally struggled with as a dancer that these techniques have helped you with?
One of my biggest struggles in high school and college, and I know I'm not alone in this, was body image. Despite sort of like being at the top of my classes and from all of my teachers in every jury or anytime I got feedback, it was always, you're a good dancer, but you need to lose weight. And I was given all kinds of advice about how to do that. And I tried, every fad diet there was, from Slim Fast to Atkins to South Beach to you name it, I tried it. And not only did all of that damage my metabolism, but it very much damaged my self-worth in the process. At a certain point, my self-esteem, pretty much at the time where it was about to start auditioning, my self-esteem was pretty low. I sort of had a chip on my shoulder about all of that. It was really when I started turning toward what is actual nutrition that's going to support me in performing as a dancer versus will this food help me lose weight? That was a big shift. And then I was able to show up without that chip on my shoulder. And I noticed that I was being received differently, even though my body hadn't changed. It was an energetic thing, and it was a confidence thing in the way I was carrying myself. At first, with the body image stuff, it was very much like an I'll show them, I'm going to be successful anyway. And that only got me so far. Like, it did get me somewhere, but I reached a point where I needed to actually do the deep inner healing around how much that hurt to sort of let all of that go. I will say that happened maybe years later, actually, like during my professional career, when I looked around and realized, like, I am here. I did make it. And now it's safe for me to sort of process all of that hurt, because it can be very, very painful. And that pain point fuels a lot of my work with dancers, for sure.
I mean, I feel like when I hear you talking about the but if you would just lose the weight, that was like always the message that I got too. And I don't actually hear this a lot from dancers, but my personal response to that was wanting to have a sense of control, and not in the way of like, I'm going to control my body and lose a lot of weight. It was like, I'm in control of what I eat and I'm in control of my body and you can't tell me what to do, to a point where I was eating in a way that did not feel good at all to me. Like, you can't tell me not to have this. I'm going to have a lot of it kind
Hmm.
of thing. And I didn't feel good, but it was just like I felt like had so little control and autonomy in so many areas of my life that it was like I've got to control this one thing. And the more I was told to lose weight, the more I like wanted to go the opposite direction. I don't know if that's something
Hmm.
that you have encountered with dancers or if that's a like I feel like I don't hear as many people talking about it in that way, but that was always what I felt like.
Yeah, that can certainly come up because there's this rebellion. For me, it was in the I'll
Mhm.
show you. It sounds like for you, it was in like, yeah, well, I am going to eat this. And what are you going to do about it?
Exactly.
Like, but we have to control something, right? When we feel out of control, I think it's just a natural human response. I tend to be more type A, probably for reasons where I felt out of control in my upbringing. Like, I think that's a natural response to when we feel like things are out of our control to reach for what's in our control. Absolutely.
Yeah. If there's a dancer who is dealing with body image, dealing with any of these things we've talked about, what would you tell them? What could be an action step they could take today to start to work through this?
Great question. The first thing I always recommend is body gratitude practices. And the dancer who comes in with that, that's the last thing they want to do. So I always say,
Mm,
I don't care if you're grateful for your pinky finger. Like, I don't care if you're grateful for your eyelashes, or I don't care, but there is something that you can be grateful for. It is definitely not only being grateful for how something looks on your body, more so the sense of value and the ability to learn to appreciate our bodies comes from learning to value what our bodies are doing or how our bodies are supporting us. So I offer body gratitude meditations, body gratitude journaling, and really this introspection and this reflection on, wow, my heart is beating right now, and I'm not doing anything to make that happen. Like, my body is awesome, or my lungs, I'm just breathing, let alone doing the turns and the leaps and the floor work and, whatever else amazing that dancers can do so beautifully. Like, remembering how miraculous our bodies are, I think that's always step number one. And that doesn't mean that we're glossing over what pains us. That's still there. That still needs to be worked through eventually. But the first step is recognizing the body's not the enemy. There are things that our bodies are doing really well, and our bodies are always trying to support us.
yeah, I feel like for all of the issues that I've had and still continue to work through, when I had my first child and held this tiny baby in my arms who my body had created, and I'm like, I literally grew that arm, and like this tiny person, and that was the first time I felt like I was able to have that realization of like, that's amazing that your body did that.
Yeah.
And pregnancy was really hard for me, and it was very physically challenging, emotionally challenging, all the things. It was very healing for me to be able to recognize how amazing that was. Even if I looked at my body and I didn't like the way that it looked, or I still was wanting to nitpick things, it was the first time I was able to be like, wow, but look what you created.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying you have to go through a pregnancy to experience that, but that was a very pivotal moment for me personally in coming to that place of gratitude for everything my body could do, because I had spent so many years talking down to my body
Hmm.
about all the things I felt it couldn't do and the way it couldn't look. Dancers are so, so hard on themselves. And we're in a culture where we're constantly getting corrections and feedback. And of course, we need that to grow.
Yeah.
But when your job is constantly being told all the things that you should be doing differently with your body, it's very hard to get to that place of gratitude for what it can do. But that was a huge shift for me mentally. And even now, just to like look at my children and be like, you made those people with your body. And that's crazy.
It is
Like,
crazy and it's amazing.
yeah.
Yeah. I'm so glad you brought that up. And something else you brought up reminded me that it's also what we call body image resilience. So, this is the idea that you never arrive at this place of perfect body image. I can't say I've arrived at this place where I never feel a moment of self doubt. Like, of course I do. My body's going through changes after surgery and, all these things. And of course, those things come up, but the resilience piece comes in knowing how strongly you value your body and knowing that it's a moment that will pass, and knowing that your body is so much more than just how you look. Treating each difficult body image moment like an invitation to remember those things.
Ooh, I love that. Yeah, and the book you mentioned, More Than a Body, was one of our book club picks for the Brain Ballerina Book Club, and I totally recommend that book, and I'm glad you reminded me because I think I need to read it again. Definitely something that I think every dancer should read,
Mm-hmm.
help to start to internalize that resilience piece.
Yeah, such a good book. And they're a TED Talk too. If you don't, to the listeners, if you don't have time to sit down and read the book, like they have a great TED Talk that summarizes a lot of what's in there.
Perfect. Okay, Nicole, before we wrap up, I would just love to hear if you had one piece of advice to give to aspiring dancers pursuing a career, what would you tell them?
I would say the dance world, or even just the world in general, may tell you all the reasons why you can't or why you're not up to the task. And I would say to dancers, you are responsible for being your own champion. Of course, take the corrections, the constructive feedback, be open, but at a deeper level, you get to take every struggle, you get to learn the lesson from it, and you get to turn it into gold for yourself. You wouldn't have a hunger to dance, and you wouldn't have this dream if you weren't meant to chase it. I always say this, I'm not talking about like it would be nice if, or I'd like to dance, or maybe one day. I'm talking about like raw, passionate, almost painful hunger to dance. Like I must dance. Like if you have that and you train and you stay open and you listen to where life is taking you, and this is key, if you take care of yourself also throughout all of that, I truly believe dancers who do all of that will be unstoppable.
If there's any dancers out there who want to reach out to you or want to learn more about what you do, the work you do, can you tell us how they can find you?
Sure. The best place right now is Instagram. I'm at nicole.e.sabella. And I'm currently reworking my website, but you can go to thenourisheddancer.com.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much for this conversation, Nicole. It was so great to connect with you, and I learned a lot, and I really appreciate all of your work. So thank you.
I'm really grateful for the opportunity. Thank you, Caitlin.
Thank you for tuning in to the Brainy Ballerina podcast. If you found this episode insightful, entertaining, or maybe a bit of both, I would so appreciate you taking a moment to leave a rating and hit subscribe. By subscribing, you'll never miss an episode, and you'll join our community of dancers passionate about building a smart and sustainable career in the dance industry. Plus, your ratings help others discover the show too. I'll be back with a new episode next week. In the meantime, be sure to follow along on Instagram at The Brainy Ballerina for your daily dose of dance career guidance.